Eamon. I'm very honoured to be here tonight to speak. I want to start by agreeing with Sean and Gabriel that our Celtic Tiger economy was unsustainable. We were money chasing money, was never going to do it. Property is a service to the economy, it's not a productive sector in its own right. We were too short term, we didn't see that there were limits. And our politics, as maybe Bono would sing, was too focused on promises in the year of an election. And then maybe I might just go into that electoral deficit disorder. What exactly is that in our country? It's we, the electorate, keep voting for people who promise something that just leads to a deficit and then we're in disorder. That's populist politics, where it's got us. We need to get away from that. And our populist politics is still populist when you're going on. There's an easy budget option. Or there's easy banking options. There were no easy banking options, I can tell you, and I can tell you as well that decisions are made. You asked what was the reason they were taken? In the interests of the Irish people, doing our best to try and get out of a bloody difficult crisis. So let's not just go back to that all the time and depict it in that manner. Let's talk about how we're going to create jobs and move forward, which is the title of the talk here tonight. The Celtic Tiger was brilliant for our country in giving full employment. 10 years, hundreds of years we have had people leaving and not able to work. The fantastic health benefits that came to this country when we could all work. The great welcoming that we could give when we could then. Yes, during the Celtic Tiger. Hear me out. If I can make the point. In the Celtic Tiger, we had close to full employment. It was very good for our country. But ultimately there was a flaw in the model. It was a systemic failure in the thinking. Donegal, I made an exception, you're right. I take that. And that is a problem. But there was also a wider systemic problem across the country in that the model couldn't last. It didn't recognise their limits. It didn't recognise that we believe there could be growth forever, growth in property prices forever, that we would forever benefit from. That was the fundamental problem. At the core of the Celtic Tiger, we reached the limits in property prices, in credit, and now we have a significant crash. So it wasn't going to work, the Celtic Tiger, as a model, and we can't go back to it. It's time for us to move on, and let's look for set our compass in a different direction. We entered government, the Green Party, in 2007, actually with a lot, believing for many years that that model was broken, wasn't right. But I'll be honest, I never expected the scale of the crash, the speed of the crash. But that happened when we were on the watch, and it was our job to try and get this country out of the difficult crisis that it was in, to try and stabilise the system, try and stem the tide, so that we could redraw and get the economy back. And that's what we've been doing the last 2 years. And I'd say, Enda, as well, the one thing you said is very true, that we had a similar position in 1983, and we did nothing until 1988-89, 6 years, as you said. I remember my brother left the country. We were down in the port in Dunleary. I remember my mother and my father and most of us crying as my brother, an architect, left to go to London. My other brother went. My sister went. I went. I came back in the late 80s, around about the time we were talking about. Was unemployed and then had the idea to set up a business. And the country turned because we started taking action. 2 years later, my business was a success. I brought home my sister, who was still running that business. But the political lesson, in each of those 6 years, when you watched your brothers and sisters go, when you were on the dole, was you don't want politics that's not willing to take tough decisions. We have to learn from our mistakes. That was a mistake we made in the 80s, is we let Labour and Fianna Gael, as well as Fianna Fáil, couldn't agree on some of the hard budget decisions that had to be taken. That's a lesson that I learnt, and I think people of my generation learnt, which is why in government we've been willing to, at electoral cost to ourselves, to make what we think are the right decisions. Crucially, though, our task is now, as I said, looking on the issue of economic redesign. We've actually shown, to answer your question, who's been thinking long-term? We were thinking long-term for 30 years. And what do we see when we look long-term? Two issues that dominate in my mind. You think really long-term, up on the crow's nest, Gabriel. You know that. You truly know this. Firstly, our wealth in this planet has been built on oil, most remarkable energy resource ever. It's coming to a peak in production and it will then start to decline. We have to address that fundamental long-term geological reality and start designing different ways of feeding ourselves, sheltering ourselves, and transporting ourselves. Second long-term certainty we're facing, in my mind, is the challenge of climate change, the greatest challenge that mankind has ever faced. It threatens not just our economy, if we get it wrong, but our very civilization. So we've been 30 years looking at this and thinking, they're the challenges we got to meet. And in government, we went into government to start that process from the crow's nest to saying, listen lads, we're going to have to change the direction of this country. This is the way to go. John Ashton, former climate change advisor to the UK government, said, for business, this is a no-brainer. There's no point in trying to build recovery and then to try and build a low-carbon economy afterwards. We need to build a low-carbon economy recovery, because if it's not low-carbon, it won't last very long. Today I want to set out what exactly is that plan for economic recovery, where the jobs will come from, explain how we've been actually trying to implement it and effectively implementing it in government, look at some of the obstacles to it, and then maybe just say that there's a social or other dimensions on that issue of sustainability which I believe are important. I believe we will recover. I think it is starting around the country. I think we are, you're right, an enterprising and creative people. But the real question is what type of recovery? Because as I said, if we go back to the same model, the old model, it will not last. We need a new model of recovery, and I believe it will be green. That's what the rest of the world is looking to go towards. They are the products they're going to want, so it makes sense for us to go in that direction. We've made real advances as a country, despite the property bubble carnage from it. We're still a capable people. If we set our mind to something, we can achieve it. We're in a similar space to where we were, I believe, in the 1950s. Then as now, we knew that the plan wasn't working, that the model wasn't working. We knew we had to switch away from a kind of belief that an inward-looking Ireland could prosper in a globalising world. The 1958 Programme for Economic Development, authored by Whittaker, set a different course. It was a hugely important moment. We're at a similar moment now. We have to regroup, rethink, and head in a different direction. I believe similar in that it should be international in our outlook. We have much strength now. We have much more strengths now. In the 1950s, we were in a very different position. Looking in the report, that's an interesting title, or a table rather, showing what our manufacturing good exports were in 1957. Apparel, £2.7 million. Vehicles, £2.4 million. Paper and cardboard, £2 million. Machinery and electrical goods, £1.1 million. Woolen and worsted woven fabrics, £1.1 million. Yarn and thread of wool or hair, £1.1 million. That's our list of manufactured goods in 1957. Today, we export €150 billion of goods and rising. 500,000 people are employed by those companies, and they in turn help pay for the rest of the economy. That's our productive sector. So that's the base we're starting from. We are starting with strength in hand compared to the 50s when we were starting with very little. But as I said, I think crucially now is the time. Yes, we need to look and do those inquiries in real detail as to what went wrong. But also now is the time for us to start thinking, what do we need to start getting right? Whittaker said, if I can quote him again, it's well written, at the end of his 9-page reduction, which summarised pretty much the plan. He said, it would be well to shut the door on the past and to move forward, energetically, intelligently, and with the will to succeed, but without expecting miracles of progress in a short time. We've seen twice now, after that first turnaround in the 50s and in the 80s when we started to take action, that actually once you set the right course, the country reacts quite quickly. Turnaround comes quicker than Whittaker had expected in that first plan. So that's what we need to do. We need to work out what we want to sell to the rest of the world. Whittaker at the time said we have a comparative advantage in grass growing. Turn that into a big agricultural industry. So what's our advantage now? I would say, I've thought long and hard about this and looked at it and tried to look at all the various different sectors. I'll summarise it down into 2 or 3 easy steps. Our resources now, as always, but particularly now, are in our land and our people. In our land, there are 3 industries where we trade: in agriculture, in tourism and in energy. And in people, there are 3 major industries where we have: in manufacturing, in financial services and in traded services. That's what we do as a country. That's what we trade. I want to set out to you where I think our advantage and where our opportunity, and some of the realities of what's actually happening in this area. In agriculture, we have an 8 billion annual export market, as I said, coming out of a benign growing climate. It's 110,000 people employed directly and indirectly, and it's the lifeblood, the farmers are right, of our rural economy. We can expand this sector. I think the opportunity for us is realising actually that there is added value, as you say, Gabriel, in the likes of Glenesk, in that actually you can sell Irish food abroad and know that it's come from a particular farmer or farm and not just a factory. Our farming is less intensive. It's difficult sometimes, but actually gives you a comparative advantage, which you can sell products at a higher price to the rest of the world. That's a Green Party approach. It was stitched in. It is that policy document that was published last Monday, which is now government policy, that our food policy is going to be using this image, and not just the image, but the real credentials we have as a green island. Check it out on the web, Department of Agriculture website. It's our new strategy for 2020 on where we're going in food. And yes, we're going green. All the hoo-ha about the stags, the reality is Irish farmers are going to be benefited and helped by us getting our green credentials right. In tourism, the €5 billion we derive from tourism supports 119,000 jobs in the hospitality sector. It's going through a tough time in recent years, but we're still good at looking after people. People came here, they watched films like The Quiet Man or The Field or Ryan's Daughter, and they came to see the landscape they saw there. As I said, I set up a business in tourism, so I know exactly what it's like. I've actually spent time and time again on that road from Killybegs to Glencolmcille, to stay with Liam, to move on to Dunloe and Dunfanaghy. And I know what they actually look for in this country, what they love in this country. It's not just the landscape, they also like our people. You know, it was the films like The Commitments or the Mile of Foot or Intermission. They also brought people here. It was for the culture. And actually, I think in tourism, there's a similar possibility for us to combine a modern Ireland that's relevant to us and still of interest to our visitors. That's our task. And I think, again, it's green. I think actually it's in areas like active tourism, it's in areas like cultural tourism that are real and genuine. If we get a good reputation of those, we'll be back on our feet again in tourism in no time. Energy, the third of these 3 land industries that we have to concentrate on. And the successful economies of the future will be those who get the energy challenge right more than any other. For we are facing the greatest challenge we've ever faced. It's not going to be easy, this low-carbon challenge. It is not easy. But I think we can actually do it. I think we can actually excel at it as a people. We don't have Russian oil or Russian gas. We don't have Saudi oil. But we have some of the world's best resources in priceless commodities, which is our wind, our biomass and our ocean energy. And my plan is to turn that into thousands of jobs and also a new trading export sector in the same way that Whitaker 50 years ago turned a grass-growing comparative advantage into €8 billion industry now in food. We need to do the exact same over the next 30 or 40 years in energy. And we are doing it. There are 3 aspects of the plan being implemented. First is to develop those renewable resources. We have doubled our wind power in the last 3 years. About second or third now in Europe, we will become number 1. We will overtake the Danes in the next 4 or 5 years, without doubt. And we will become the world-leading country in wind power. We are building now a grid out into the Atlantic down in Belmullet, which should benefit Killybegs, I hope, and it will. If the technology works, it's experimental, it's innovative, it's risk-taking, it's right. We are building this summer a new grid to the UK. And actually we signed a deal with our European partners, 9 countries, last December, that we're going to build a European supergrid, which gives us as a country the opportunity to sell on that grid the excess power we have. That's the plan. It'll take a long time, but it's absolutely achievable. Second part of the plan, improving our building stock, as you said. I think was it Gabriel or Sean saying. And it is the one that we have to cut out first. It's the base, quickest savings we can make. We have a €6 billion fossil fuel import bill. We can cut that more quickly than anything else by going into our homes. When I came into office 3 years ago, we were doing up about 3,000 or 4,000 homes a year, retrofitting and making them energy efficient. This year we'll do about 50,000. I have a plan in place which will bring that up to 100,000 and, yes, go into our public buildings, which is the first thing we should be concentrating on. It's an economic no-brainer, and it creates our jobs in our construction industry that are sustainable, that will last. Thirdly, perhaps the most potential for jobs, which is what we need to be talking about now. We can use Ireland as a test bed for the convergence that is occurring between ICT and energy efficiency. People may wonder why we put such attention on electric vehicles and smart metering in recent time. But as Sean and Gabriel know, whichever country is actually one of the leaders in that integration, in the creation of what they call this smart grid, will actually be the centre of the next industrial revolution. This is where huge international attention is moving towards. We have a very good grid. We have the world-leading ICT companies here and some seriously capable Irish companies. We have everything in place to become the centre for that smart grid technology. And that's why IBM came here this May in an announcement that didn't get much coverage, but my God, it was historic. Their World Research Centre for Smart Cities didn't go to Singapore, didn't go to Denmark, didn't go to London. It came to Ireland. So we are doing it, it is happening, and it is delivering jobs. That's the third of the three land areas where we are actually delivering on the plan that we see we need. Third three areas relate to our people. And we're good, I said. We're flexible. There's something in our informatics as a people that makes us good in this services area. We've shown we can do it. We have one of the best workforces in the world when it works well. Three areas. I'll be very brief on this because I'm conscious of time. We have to compete. We have to compete with Eastern Europe and India and China. We're doing it in some of the high-tech areas, the likes of medical, biopharma, chemicals, ICT. We need, you're right, absolutely, to broaden that out. We cannot, in the West, give up manufacturing to the East. It ain't sustainable. And we in this country have to broaden our manufacturing base out from those very significant successful sectors we have. Financial services. Even with the downturn, our IFSC is trading in about a €15 billion industry, employing 25,000 people. We're close to London, same language, same time zone, we have a real advantage. We're developing projects like the Green IFSC where all the growth is. So there's no reason we shouldn't double that industry again in the next 20 years. That pays for every part of this country. Okay, it may be city-centred, based, but the revenue, the tax revenue, goes to services across this country. Finally, of these three people industries in the area of traded services. It's the largest potential, as I said earlier on when it came to talking about ICT. And we've been remarkably successful. We have reasons to be critical of ourselves, but we also have reason to acknowledge where we are bloody good. And we got the first wave of American investment. Yes, largely American. But most of the modern computers came from there, and we assembled them. We got the second wave in the chip and other technology manufacturers. Japanese as well as American, as well as German. And we've now got the third wave. Internet companies like Google, Yahoo, LinkedIn, Facebook, they're all coming here. So we're still good at this. We're still becoming a world centre where actually we can develop jobs. And crucially, we have an opportunity now to trade digital services on cloud computing networks where we have software capabilities that we can develop them. We're good at software. We're good at gaming. We're good at animation. We're good at mobile applications. We're good at middleware. We're good at internet security. Because we like chatting, maybe, we're good at social networking. We're young. We're international in our outlook. And all those factors mean that we should be able to embrace the internet as a jobs opportunity, as well as a social and environmental benefit opportunity for this country. Now, I know there are things that we have to do. I know it's all not rosy in the garden. I know that there's been a lot of frustration at the slow pace of broadband being rolled out. But things are starting to improve. Again, I can only count from my 3 years in office. But in those 3 years, the number of broadband connections have gone from about 600,000 up to about 1.5 million now and rising. Yes, we need to go into our schools. I started the first 80 schools this year, delivered ahead of budget, ahead of target, under budget, with really high speed, 100 megabit connectivity. And we're committed the next 2 years to going to every single secondary school and on after that. So yes, we need to do that. But we also have invested in our exemplar network, which actually has potential to develop here a really high-speed, internationally important internet development. We've invested in the National Broadband Scheme and now a new Rural Broadband Scheme, which means we will have universal broadband coverage by 2012 with the same sort of ambition that the Finns have been talking about recently. So yes, we cannot rest on our laurels. Yes, there's room for further improvement, but there is improvement occurring. 100 megabit speeds going out to about 800,000 homes this year. It's real improvement, and it's happening quite quickly. Competition works. Just to show that this thing is working. It's not just a plan, it's actually being implemented and it's actually delivering jobs. We do a tot in my department of every job that's advertised with the green energy or green ICT component in it. And we get them verified by SEAI, our Sustainable Energy Authority, to say, listen, is this real? And that tot's showing 16,000 jobs now in the last 3 years. Real jobs, committed, in train, being delivered. Jobs like those 5,000 people we have supported working on insulating those 5,000 homes. They're real jobs, real people. Companies like Nualight doing exactly what you're saying, Sean. I don't know if you know them down in Cork, lighting company. That's gone from nothing to 100 people in the last 2 years. And they're in exactly that area about manufacturing, assembly, where we need to be good at. Companies like Solarprint, Sandyford, and entrepreneurs with some really advanced technology for solar power indoors as well as outdoors. So it is happening, it's real, and we can deliver it. I'll finish because I'm conscious of time, but there are two other points to make, well, two other sections. There are obstacles to the recovery. As I said, we need further investment in broadband. That's a given. I also agree with the speakers earlier on about our education system, that we need inspiration in our education system. We need to move it from being a learning by rote, as I see it, into a learning how to learn system, away from a learning off system. And that probably is the most important thing we need to do, in my mind. We need to implement the Croke Park Agreement, so we have a very efficient and effective and innovative public service. We need a risk-taking public service. We need to promote those who are willing to do things differently, those teachers who have excellence. And we need not to hang someone if a plan doesn't exactly go wrong. One of the reasons we're cautious and conservative is every time something goes wrong, the whole country jumps on them. Now, it's right to be critical and to put things to account, but getting a more can-do, risk-taking environment will also require us accepting that sometimes everything doesn't go to plan. We need a banking system that needs to know how to lend to enterprise, and crucially, we need a banking system that does not foist debt on people who they know cannot pay it back in the future. That's one of the biggest lessons we need to learn of these recent years. You're right, and I agree, we need to move away from a clientist political system. And that's why I don't think we should have one driven by corporate donations. And I don't think it matters whether it's corporate donations from a good guy or a bad guy. It's impossible to start down that road of trying to discern who's the good guys, who's the bad guys. You're lost. The point is, I don't think we should be getting the money at all. We don't need it. It doesn't cost money to speak. We need a politics that understands the sustainability agenda. Not just the easy bits, but the hard bits. Like we're going to have to build a grid to tap into this renewable energy power. It's not easy, it's not popular, but without it we will not have that sustainable, secure and low-priced energy which will give us jobs into the future. We need new metrics for success. GDP is not a measure of national well-being. The lesson, as I said, in that Celtic Tiger years is we don't just chase growth for its own sake. We look for something with more values. The Celtic Tiger years is gone. I don't think we should weep for its demise. I think we should take the best from it and discard the rest. A capitalist system, it won't survive if you corrode its social capital. This last point I want to make is that sustainability has to be social. Like a capitalist system, a trading system needs trust to be able to do contracts. And I don't think we need to go back to a world where the CEO in the bank is earning 100 times what the teller is earning, because that undermines trust, social capital. I don't think we need to build gated communities. We need to slightly liberate our children, I think, because that again is a more secure environment when everyone is looking out after each other. And I think we have to offer our students a reason for our young people, a reason for studying and a reason for working, which is more than just about material progress. I think we need a new economic order that will leave the planet, that will not see them indebted, either environmentally, in terms of inheriting a planet that's not fit for living in, are in financial fiscal debt. I think we need an economic order that goes beyond the simple assumption. I was taught in first year UCD economics that people are profit maximisers. I think we need an economic order that understands there are limits to growth, but not necessarily to improvements in the quality of our life. We need economics that know that my security is tied up with your security, my welfare with your welfare. Economics that understands that the actual parent working at home may be just as important as the mother or father in the office. Economics that celebrate enterprise, but also curbs the worst excesses of the markets. I go to my Green writer John Moriarty for inspiration, and he put it as we need a politics that connects all the parts of our soul that the conventional economic world has no use of and is afraid of. That's the sort of economics I think sustainable economics needs to be. I think it can inspire our people, which is what we need. A reason for actually getting up and getting on with this huge task we have of turning this country into a model of sustainable economics. Making and trading green products with the rest of the world. Employing our people on that, not just for our material well-being, but also a general sense of well-being that we're doing something special, important and honourable. That's the plan. We're doing it. What else would we do? Thank you.